The final day of middle school. That feeling of excitement mixed with a sense of nostalgia hangs in the air. For most, it's a day filled with fond farewells, exchanging yearbooks and signing your name one last time in the books of friends who you might never see again. It's a rite of passage, a transition from childhood to adolescence. And for me, it should have been just another innocent day. But everything changed when I opened my yearbook. It was the last day of 8th grade, and like most people, I couldn't wait to get my hands on my yearbook. I ran through the pages quickly, scanning the signatures of friends, reading the typical messages like "Hags have a great summer" and "Good luck next year," a few funny notes here and there, maybe a doodle or two. But then something stopped me cold. A message that stood out for all the wrong reasons. It was a signature I didn't recognize, Samuel Robinson III. His name alone sounded formal, like something out of a storybook. But it wasn't the name that struck me. It was the message he'd written: "Hags, I'll be seeing you again." At first, I brushed it off. Maybe it was some kid trying to be quirky, or maybe it was a simple mistake. I had no idea who Samuel was. I'd never spoken to him, never even exchanged glances in the hallway. So naturally, I thought it was just some harmless weird note. But the more I stared at it, the more unsettled I became. "I'll be seeing you again." What did that mean? Why would someone I didn't even know say something like that? It wasn't a typical "have a good summer" message, and it definitely wasn't anything that should have been in a yearbook. I tried to push the thought aside. After all, it was the last day of school. There were yearbooks to sign and parties to plan. But as the hours passed, the weird feeling lingered. I had no way of contacting Samuel to ask him about it, and besides, the school year was officially over. So I left it at that, telling myself it was probably just a quirky kid doing what quirky kids do. But things didn't stay that simple for long. That night, my friends and I had a sleepover. It was one of those typical nights where you're having a blast and the last thing on your mind is worrying about strange yearbook signatures. We were down in my basement playing games and snacking on chips with my parents far away in their bedroom on the top floor. It was a perfect night until we heard that knock. The sound of knocking on the storm door, the kind of door that no one ever uses. My heart skipped a beat. Who could it be? At that hour, the knocking wasn't frantic but rhythmic, deliberate. It didn't sound like a typical knock either, almost like someone was waiting for us to answer. I was scared, but my friends were strangely unfazed. They thought it was funny, like some random person had come to visit us. But when I looked outside through the small window beside the door, I didn't see a face, just a shadow in the dim light. Then Kieran, one of my friends, made the mistake of shouting out, "Who's there?" It was like a signal to whoever was outside. I wanted to stop him, but it was too late. The moment he spoke, the knocking stopped. Then came the voice, a high-pitched, almost cheery tone, like it was just another one of our friends trying to join the party. "Come around to the back door," the voice said, and it sent a shiver down my spine. It was so casual, so friendly, that it made my blood run cold. I couldn't ignore the strange feeling creeping up my spine. My heart was racing. I tried to stay calm, but my mind was spinning. The guy outside, he sounded like a teenager, probably around our age. But who was he? How did he know we were even down here? I tried to convince myself it was nothing, but a part of me knew something wasn't right. My friends, of course, thought it was an exciting mystery. They pressured me into checking it out. Reluctantly, I agreed. The idea of ignoring it felt wrong, but I didn't want to be a coward. We crept upstairs, trying not to make too much noise, and I peered out of the kitchen window. There, standing under the pale streetlight, was a figure, a shadowy, indistinct form. But as I got closer to the window, I saw his face. My stomach dropped. It was him. Samuel Robinson III, the same kid from my yearbook, the same kid who had left that unsettling message. And now there he was, standing outside my house in the middle of the night. I didn't know how to explain it to my friends. I froze for a moment, unsure whether I should open the door. But before I could react, they had already moved to open it. Panic surged through me. I had to stop them. I couldn't let them do that. I quickly explained to them what had happened, how Samuel had written in my yearbook, and how strange the whole situation was. At first they didn't understand. It was just some kid from our school, right? But the more I described the situation, the more unsettled they became. By then, Samuel had started motioning toward the side of the house, signaling like he wanted me to go to the window. It was as if he was trying to draw me out, like we were playing a twisted game. At that point, I knew I wasn't dealing with some random kid. Something about him felt off. I went to the kitchen window and cracked it open just a tiny bit, hoping he wouldn't notice how terrified I was. My friends gathered behind me, unsure of what to do next. "Hey," I called out to Samuel. "I saw your message in my yearbook. What do you want?" He smiled, his face strangely calm. "Oh, so you got my message," he said. "I've always watched you from afar. We could have been good friends, you know." The words didn't make sense. Who was this kid, and why was he saying things like that? He had been watching me from afar. I tried to remain calm, trying not to escalate things further, but I had to know more. "How did you know where I live?" I asked. Samuel didn't answer. Instead, he seemed to dismiss the question entirely, as if it didn't matter. But just as I was about to try again, David, my friend, called him a creepy stalker. "Why don't you just leave?" he said, and that's when everything changed. Samuel's smile disappeared. His face contorted, and for a moment I saw something completely different. His eyes narrowed, and in an instant he was screaming at us. The things he said didn't make any sense. He raged about how much he hated us, how we should all die, and even mentioned my ex, someone he had no right knowing about. His anger was terrifying. Then, before I could react, he lunged at the window, trying to force it open. I slammed it shut as quickly as I could, locking it in place. But Samuel wasn't done. He banged on the window with a force that made the whole house shake, snarling at us like an animal. My friends and I were in shock. I don't know how long this lasted, but it felt like forever. Finally, we heard footsteps running away, and then my parents came rushing down the stairs, demanding to know what was going on. When I explained what had happened, my dad ran outside in his underwear, trying to catch up with Samuel. He came back a few minutes later, saying he couldn't find him. But that didn't make me feel any better. My heart was still racing, my hands still shaking. The next morning, my parents contacted the school, hoping to get some answers. And that's when we learned the truth. Samuel had been expelled weeks before the yearbooks were printed. He shouldn't even have been at the school on the last day. His picture should never have been in my yearbook. The thought of it still unsettles me. Samuel had snuck into the school just to write me that message. And after that, he disappeared. There were no leads. The school tried to cover it up, but I knew I couldn't forget it. The fact that he knew where I lived, that still haunts me. I never saw Samuel again. But to this day, I can't shake the feeling that something dark was brewing beneath the surface. What if he was always watching me, waiting for the right moment to make his move, and why was he so obsessed with me? Fast forward a few years, and I'm now a senior in high school. Graduation is right around the corner, and like most seniors, I'm feeling a mix of excitement and relief. The year had been long, filled with pressure from exams, deadlines, and the looming unknown of the next chapter of life. But this was the last day. No more homework, no more worrying about college applications, just one big celebration before we headed off into the world. And that's exactly what we did. We all gathered at the clock tower in the middle of the campus, our usual senior hangout spot. The whole courtyard was packed with hundreds of other students, all of us celebrating the end of high school. The mood was electric. People were laughing, joking, and letting go of all the stress that had piled up over the years. It felt like the perfect send-off. But as the night went on, I started to notice something that would turn this celebration into something far darker. Garrett, one of my closest friends, was at the center of it all. You know the type, the guy who's always looking for trouble, the one who boasts about being crazy and never backing down from a fight. To Garrett, everything was a challenge. He thrived in chaos, and this night it was no different. I was standing with my friends, just enjoying the atmosphere, when Garrett did what Garrett does best. He found a homeless man standing in the middle of the street, shouting nonsensical things and blocking traffic. Most people would just walk around, avoid confrontation, and keep the night peaceful. But not Garrett. Without a second thought, Garrett started yelling at the man, telling him to move out of the way and stop causing trouble. The homeless man didn't respond the way Garrett expected, though. Instead of backing down, the man stepped forward, his demeanor shifting from confusion to aggression. I felt the tension building. We were in the middle of a busy street, and we didn't know if this man was dangerous, but Garrett wasn't backing down. He was egging the man on, making the situation worse. I stepped in, trying to calm Garrett down, but he wasn't having it. He shoved my hand away and charged at the man, running full speed at him like it was some kind of game. The guy, clearly startled, turned and started to run. It was like watching a flock of birds scatter when a predator charges through. The man bolted away, and Garrett laughed, feeling like he had won some victory. But something didn't feel right. We all joked about it, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we had just made a dangerous situation even worse. The homeless man was angry now, and when we turned around to walk away, I saw him following us at a distance. It was unsettling. "I don't like this," I said to the group. "We shouldn't be leading him back to our house." But before I could convince anyone else to turn around, Garrett was already sprinting toward the man, shouting at him as he ran. Once again, the homeless man fled, retreating into the shadows. For a moment, we thought we were safe. We thought we had scared him off. But the feeling of unease didn't leave me. It lingered as we walked back toward our off-campus house. By the time we reached the house, the dread had started to grow in the pit of my stomach. I turned around, half expecting to see the homeless man still following us, but I saw nothing. Relieved, I thought maybe we had gotten away from the madness. We got to the front door, and I went inside to grab some food I had ordered. It was all normal until I noticed the side gate to our backyard was wide open. That was odd. We always tied it shut with a piece of twine to keep it from blowing open. I froze for a moment, realizing what that meant. Someone had been in our backyard. I immediately thought of the homeless man. He had followed us home. Somehow he had gotten into our yard. I dropped my DoorDash bags onto the porch and immediately went around to the back of the house to check it out. My friends, who had been in a bit of a party haze, didn't seem to notice the change in mood, but I felt the creeping sense of danger. I was drunk, but not enough to ignore the warning signs. As I rounded the corner, the night seemed too quiet, too still. My heart pounded as I moved closer to the side gate, and then before I could process it, I felt a rope tightening around my throat. I gasped for air, my hands reaching for my neck, trying to free myself from the chokehold. The man was behind me, stronger than I expected, pulling tighter with each passing second. My vision blurred. I was choking. My mind raced. This couldn't be happening. Not like this. I fought with every ounce of strength I had. I swung my body backward, managing to throw the man off balance. With everything I had, I flung myself to the ground, gasping for air as I struggled to break free. I could feel the rough rope digging into my skin. But I wasn't free yet. The man wasn't done. He was on top of me in an instant, clawing at my face. I felt the sharp pain as his nails scraped down my cheeks. Blood poured down my face, and all I could think about was surviving. I managed to push him off me, using my legs to get some distance. The man, angry and wild, ran off into the night, disappearing into the shadows as quickly as he had come. Shaking, I stumbled to my feet, my face stinging from the scratches. I was bleeding, but I couldn't focus on that. I was still processing what had just happened. Had it all been a random attack, or had the man been following us the whole time, waiting for the right moment to strike? I stumbled inside, and my friends, realizing something was wrong, rushed over to me. I tried to explain what had happened, but all I could think about was getting medical attention. Garrett, who was now visibly shaken, insisted on taking me to the hospital. When the police arrived, they weren't much help. They couldn't find the man, and with me moving out of town soon, there wasn't much they could do. The whole situation felt like it had come out of nowhere, and now all I had left were the scars on my face and the haunting thought that maybe, just maybe, we had brought this on ourselves. Garrett felt terrible. I could see the guilt in his eyes, and honestly, I didn't blame him. I just hoped he would learn from this. But what disturbed me the most was how quickly everything escalated. One moment we were celebrating the end of high school, and the next I was nearly killed by someone who had nothing left to lose. That night changed everything. It wasn't just a reminder of the dangers lurking around us, it was a wake-up call. Reckless actions have real consequences, and I'm lucky to be here today to share this story. The final day of middle school was supposed to be a time of celebration, a time for us all to reflect on the years we spent together, the friendships we had made, and the teachers who had shaped us. It was a rite of passage, the end of an era. But looking back, the last day of 8th grade wasn't just an innocent celebration for me. It was a day that would reveal something far darker than I could ever have imagined. I want to tell you about Sven, a classmate I never thought much about at the time. He wasn't the most noticeable kid in school. He didn't hang out with anyone, always seemed to keep to himself, and avoided eye contact like it was a game. Sven didn't speak much either, and when he did, his voice was deep, almost unnaturally so for a 13-year-old. His voice often made other kids laugh at him, mocking him behind his back, but no one ever bothered to stand up for him. It was just the way of things. Sven didn't seem to care about the social dynamics at school. He wore the same thing every day, oversized burgundy hoodies and cargo shorts. It was like he didn't care how people saw him, and honestly, no one paid much attention to him unless they had to. Most of the time, Sven would just sit in the back of the classroom staring blankly at the board, never participating in conversations or group activities. He was the type of kid who'd be happy to just fade into the background and go unnoticed. But then came the day I'll never forget, the last day of school, the day we all went a little wild and took part in the tradition of sneaking into other classrooms. It was something the older students had done before us, and now it was our turn to mess with the teachers. The whole school was in on it, or at least pretending to be. The teachers knew we were going to break all the rules, but they let us have our fun. It was a rite of passage, and we all played along, knowing that the end of middle school was our last chance to be careless. I was in one of the few classes I shared with Sven. The room was packed with students from other classes, all of us scattered across the room, talking, goofing off, and making the most of our final moments. The teacher, Mrs. Bell, was trying to keep things in order, but we were all too caught up in the excitement of the day. Everyone except Sven. That day, he was acting stranger than usual. He was tapping his foot nervously, glancing around the room as if he was waiting for something to happen. It wasn't like him. Usually he was the kid who sat quietly, completely indifferent to the chaos around him. But that day, it was different. His eyes kept darting to the door, the windows, and the other students. It felt like he was on edge, like he knew something we didn't. And then I noticed something even stranger. The classroom was full of unfamiliar faces, kids I didn't recognize. Sure, a few random students would come in during the day, but there were far too many this time. It was like they weren't even from our school. I'm not sure if anyone else noticed, but I certainly did. But I didn't say anything. After all, it was the last day. Everyone was caught up in the fun, and I didn't want to ruin the mood. But as the day wore on, things started to feel off. Mrs. Bell, who had been cheerful all day, suddenly seemed uneasy. She wasn't as focused on us as usual. She kept looking toward the back of the room, and when she talked to the other teachers in hushed tones, I couldn't help but feel like something was wrong. It all came to a head when Mrs. Bell walked to her desk, picked up the classroom phone, and turned her back to us. A few minutes later, another teacher appeared at the door and spoke with her in low voices. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but the exchange was tense. I had a bad feeling about it. After a short conversation, Mrs. Bell came back to the class, but this time she seemed more distant. She didn't mention the phone call or the teacher's visit. Instead, she just sat down at her desk and shuffled some papers, pretending everything was normal. But I knew it wasn't. There was something happening behind the scenes that none of us knew about, and it felt like the calm before a storm. And then, without warning, the fire alarm went off. The sound echoed through the halls, and everyone scrambled to line up, heading outside as usual. There was no reason to panic. This was just another fire drill, right? Except it didn't feel like a drill. The tension in the air was palpable. No one could explain why the alarm had gone off so suddenly, or why it was happening right in the middle of class. But we all followed the instructions, filed out into the field behind the building, and grouped up with our homerooms. As I stood there with my classmates waiting for the all-clear signal, I couldn't help but glance back at the school. My eyes were drawn to one of the second-floor windows where I thought I saw movement. It was quick, just a flash of something, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The school was supposed to be empty. It didn't make sense. But I said nothing, too focused on the alarm and the commotion to think much of it. What happened next still haunts me. I saw the police cars pull into the parking lot, line after line of squad cars, sirens blaring. Officers rushed into the building, their urgency clear. They didn't waste any time. There was something serious going on, and no one knew what it was. We were all left in the dark, standing outside, while the school scrambled to contain whatever had happened. The teachers told us to stay calm and wait, but it was hard to remain calm when we didn't know what was going on. It wasn't until much later, when my parents got the call, that we learned the truth. Apparently a group of kids who didn't belong to our school had somehow managed to sneak in. They had brought with them disturbing tools they planned to use to set the school on fire. Their plan had been discovered when one of the teachers, Mrs. Bell, found some of the tools in one of the backpacks. It was only because of her quick thinking and the evacuation that the situation was stopped before it could escalate. But there was something else that stuck with me. The rumor that the outsiders had been let in through the side fence during recess. By who? By Sven. I still can't process it. Sven, the quiet kid who never spoke to anyone, had somehow been involved in this dark plot. He had allowed the intruders into the school without anyone knowing. And what's worse, no one had ever suspected him. After that day, I never saw Sven again. I don't know if he was expelled or if he just disappeared, but I've often wondered what went through his mind. Was he truly involved, or was he just in the wrong place at the wrong time? How did someone like him go from being a lonely, quiet kid to someone who might have played a part in something so sinister? It still makes me shudder to think about it. After the terrifying incident at school, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. It wasn't just the fact that I had narrowly escaped from what could have been a catastrophic event. It was the realization that we often overlook the quiet ones. We never knew what Sven was capable of or what was going on in his mind. Maybe he had been hiding something all along, something none of us could have predicted. But what really scared me was how close we had come to being caught in something far more dangerous than a mere prank. The school did what it could to keep things under wraps. The administration didn't want the public to know just how close the situation had come to disaster. They assured the parents that everything was under control and that we were safe. They tried to make it seem like a one-off incident, a freak accident. But for those of us who had been there, we knew it was much more than that. The truth was much darker, and we couldn't erase the feeling that there was something deeply wrong with what had happened. The fact that Sven, the quiet, isolated kid, had somehow been involved left me with more questions than answers. How had he gotten wrapped up in all of this? Was he acting alone, or was he just a pawn in someone else's game? And what about the kids who had snuck in with the intention of burning the school down? What had they been planning? We never got the full story, and that's what has haunted me ever since. After the fire drill, after the police had come and gone, we were all sent home. We were told that we could go back to class in a couple of days, but honestly, none of us really felt like going back to that school. It wasn't the same anymore. I don't know if it was just the fear of what could have happened or the chilling thought that someone from our own class had been involved in something so dark, but the school felt like a different place altogether. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept racing, trying to make sense of everything. The thought of Sven, his strange behavior, and his possible involvement in the incident made my skin crawl. It was like I had been blind to what was happening right under my nose. How had I missed the signs? And what did this mean for the rest of us? How many of us had secrets we were hiding? How many of us were just pretending to be okay while something darker lurked beneath the surface? I never spoke to anyone about what had happened. It was too much to process, and besides, no one else seemed to care. Everyone else went back to their lives like the whole thing had been swept under the rug. But for me, it wasn't that easy. I couldn't forget the look in Mrs. Bell's eyes when she realized what had been going on. I couldn't forget the police officers rushing into the building, the sirens blaring, and the feeling of impending danger that had loomed over us. As the days went by, things started to return to some semblance of normal, but there was a lingering unease in the air. I still couldn't shake the thought of Sven, how he had let the outsiders into the school, how he had been a part of something that none of us could have ever anticipated. And every time I walked past the side fence, I couldn't help but wonder, was there more to Sven's story that we would never know? I couldn't help but replay the events in my mind over and over again. What had Sven been thinking when he allowed those kids in? Had he been coerced? Or was he simply a willing participant? After all that happened after the yearbook incident, the terrifying night with the homeless man and the shocking revelation about Sven, it felt like I had seen too much for a person my age. Each of those events left its mark not just on me, but on how I saw the world and the people in it. What I had once thought were simple, ordinary moments of my life now seemed layered with a tension I couldn't ignore. It was like I'd peeled back the surface and discovered a dark undercurrent that flowed just beneath the world I had always known. I've never talked about these experiences in detail with anyone, and I'm not sure why. Maybe I thought people wouldn't understand. Or maybe I was trying to make sense of it all on my own. But the truth is, every part of those experiences, every strange encounter, and unsettling moment has shaped who I am today. The yearbook incident with Samuel Robinson III was the first real sign that things weren't always as they seemed. A simple message written by someone I didn't know turned into an encounter that still haunts me. How did Samuel know where I lived? How did he find me, and why did he write that message? There are so many unanswered questions about that night. And even though I'll never get the answers I need, that encounter left a permanent scar on my sense of safety. After Samuel, I couldn't shake the feeling that anyone could be watching people who knew things about me that they shouldn't, people with hidden intentions. The night with Garrett, when we had the confrontation with the homeless man, was just another reminder that our actions, no matter how small, can have significant consequences. It's easy to think that you're invincible, that you're just having fun, and nothing bad will happen. But that night, when I was attacked in my own backyard, I learned just how quickly things can spiral out of control. I learned that danger doesn't always come from the places you expect, and that recklessness, whether it's from yourself or someone else, can change everything in an instant. I still don't know what would have happened if I hadn't fought back, if I hadn't managed to escape that grip around my neck. Then there was Sven. His involvement in the almost disastrous event at school was the one thing I still can't wrap my mind around. How had I missed the signs? How had I and everyone else failed to see that he was capable of something so dark? His quiet nature, his aloofness, his odd behavior, it all should have raised red flags, but we all ignored it. We dismissed him as just another weird kid. And in the end, he had been part of something far more sinister than any of us could have imagined. The thought that someone who had been in the same classrooms as me, who had shared the same experiences, could be involved in a plot to harm us, it shook me to my core. In the weeks following the graduation, I tried to move on, to put those experiences behind me. After all, life goes on. But it wasn't that simple. I couldn't stop thinking about the implications of what had happened, about the people around me, the ones I thought I knew, and the secrets they were hiding. It made me realize how little we truly know about each other. We wear masks, hide behind facades, and live lives that others rarely see. And sometimes the truth about those lives is far more disturbing than we could ever imagine. I'll never forget the feeling I had when I looked back at the school right after the fire drill and saw those police cars pulling in. The sirens, the urgency, it all felt so surreal. We had narrowly escaped something terrible, but the fact that it could have happened in the first place, that it had been set in motion by someone like Sven, was terrifying. It was a reminder that things are never as simple as they seem, that the quiet ones, the ones who keep to themselves, can sometimes be the most dangerous. They're the ones who go unnoticed until it's too late. The other thing that stuck with me was how quickly the situation was brushed aside. After the police left, after everything had calmed down, life went on. We all went back to our daily routines as though nothing had happened. But for me, I couldn't forget. I couldn't forget how close we had come to disaster, how we had been oblivious to the signs, and how easily things could have gone wrong. The scariest part of it all is the unanswered questions. Why did Samuel write that message in my yearbook? How did he know where I lived? What happened to him after that night? Why did Garrett provoke that homeless man? And why did he follow us all the way home? Why was Sven involved in the plot to burn the school down? Was he coerced, or did he act on his own? Why didn't anyone see it coming? In the end, I don't have answers to those questions, and maybe that's the hardest part. Sometimes there are things we'll never understand, things we'll never be able to explain. We can only live with the aftermath and the lessons they teach us. Lessons learned. As I reflect on everything that's happened, the biggest lesson I've learned is this: never underestimate the people around you. We like to think we know everyone, our friends, classmates, colleagues. We think we understand their motivations, their personalities, and their intentions. But the truth is we don't. We don't know what's hidden behind the smile, the quiet demeanor, or the seemingly harmless actions. We can't always see the darkness lurking just beneath the surface. Another lesson is the importance of paying attention to the little signs, the things that seem off, the gut feelings that tell you something isn't quite right. We often ignore our instincts, thinking they're just paranoia or overreaction. But in reality, those instincts are there for a reason. They're a warning that we should listen to, even if it means stepping out of our comfort zone. Finally, I've learned that sometimes there are no clear answers. Life is messy, unpredictable, and full of unanswered questions. We won't always have closure, and we won't always understand why things happen the way they do. But what we can do is use those experiences to grow, to become more aware, and to be more cautious in the future. The world is not as safe as we might think, and sometimes the scariest things come from the places we least expect. As for me, I'm still processing it all. But I know this much. Those experiences changed me. They opened my eyes to the complexity of the world and the people in it. And even though I'll never get all the answers, I'll never forget the lessons I learned from those dark moments. They've shaped who I am today, and for better or worse, they've given me a deeper understanding of the world around me.
Những ngày cuối cùng của trường trung học cơ sở, trung học phổ thông và lễ tốt nghiệp được cho là thời gian để ăn mừng, thời gian để mong chờ những khởi đầu mới và bỏ lại sau lưng những ký ức của quá khứ. Nhưng đối với tôi, những khoảnh khắc đó đã trở thành một loạt các bài học về lòng tin, sự nguy hiểm và sự bất trắc của cuộc sống. Thế giới không an toàn như chúng ta nghĩ, và con người không phải lúc nào cũng như về bề ngoài của họ. Điều quan trọng nhất mà tôi học được từ tất cả những điều này là không bao giờ đánh giá bất cứ điều gì theo giá trị bề ngoài. Luôn luôn có nhiều điều ẩn chứa bên dưới bề mặt, và đôi khi sự thật lại đen tối hơn chúng ta có thể tưởng tượng. Và vì vậy, khi tôi tiến về phía trước trong cuộc sống, tôi mang theo những bài học đó bên mình. Thế giới có thể đầy rẫy những điều bí ẩn, nhưng chúng ta phải cảnh giác và nhận thức, tin vào bản năng của mình và không bao giờ đánh giá thấp những người xung quanh. Sau cùng, bạn không bao giờ biết ai có thể đang che giấu một bí mật hoặc điều gì có thể ẩn núp ngay bên dưới bề mặt.